The lights were on, the crowd was waiting, and one question was hanging over everything. Could anyone really step into the drum seat that once belonged to Neil Peart? For more than 4 decades, Rush had been defined by the legendary chemistry between Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and Neil Peart. Peart's drumming was not just powerful, it was the heartbeat of Rush's most famous songs. So when Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson decided to bring Rush back to the stage years later, they knew one thing: finding the right drummer would be almost impossible. Then came Anika Nilles, a German drummer already respected around the world for her technical skill, creativity, and unique approach. Nilles was chosen to join Rush for their return. But this was not a normal band replacement. She was stepping into a position that millions of fans connected directly with Neil Peart's legacy. Before the first performance, the pressure was enormous. Fans wondered, would she try to copy Neil? Would Rush sound different? Would Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson feel like something was missing? But when Anika finally sat behind the kit with Rush for the first time, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to become Neil Peart, she brought her own identity while respecting the music that built Rush's history. The first public performance with the new lineup happened at the 2026 Juno Awards, where Rush performed "Finding My Way," the opening track from their 1974 debut album. And according to many fans watching that night, the biggest surprise was not just how well Anika played, it was the reaction from Geddy Lee. Because behind the bass, behind the vocals, and behind decades of Rush history, Geddy was seeing something he may not have expected: a new drummer who understood the past but was brave enough to create the future. And that moment would reveal why Rush believed Anika Nilles was the right person for one of the hardest jobs in rock music. For Geddy Lee, the first performance with Anika Nilles was never just about hearing a drummer play the songs correctly. It was about feeling the spirit of Rush return. After the death of Neil Peart in 2020, many fans believed Rush's story had ended. Neil was not only the band's drummer, he was the person who helped define their sound, their songwriting, and their identity. His complex rhythms and legendary drum solos became a huge part of what made Rush different from almost every other rock band. So when Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson announced Rush's return with Anika Nilles, they understood the challenge ahead. They were not searching for someone who could simply hit the same notes. They needed someone who could carry the emotion of the music. During rehearsals, Nilles reportedly approached the material with deep respect. Instead of copying every movement Neil made, she studied the songs, understood the structures, and found ways to make them feel natural with her own style. That was the moment that changed everything, because Rush's music was never only about technical perfection. It was about communication between three musicians. Geddy's bass, Alex's guitar, and Neil's drums created a conversation that fans recognized instantly. The question was whether that conversation could happen again. When Anika started playing with Geddy and Alex, the answer became clearer. She wasn't trying to replace Neil Peart. She was honoring what he created while bringing her own voice into the band. That difference mattered. Geddy Lee had spent decades playing beside one of the greatest drummers in history. He knew exactly what Rush was supposed to feel like. He would notice the smallest details, the timing, the energy, the connection between instruments. And that is why Anika's first performance carried so much pressure. The world was not just listening to a new drummer. They were watching to see if the magic of Rush could exist in a new chapter. And as the first notes filled the room, Geddy Lee discovered something surprising. The drummer sitting behind him was not trying to erase the past. She was helping Rush move forward. The biggest challenge for Anika Nilles was not learning Rush songs. She had already proven she could handle extremely difficult rhythms. Her career as a drummer had earned her respect among musicians worldwide because of her precision, creativity, and ability to build complicated grooves that still felt musical. The real challenge was much bigger. She had to step into a seat that represented decades of memories. Every drum fill, every pause, every powerful moment behind the kit would be compared to Neil Peart, and Geddy Lee understood that pressure better than anyone. For years, Geddy and Neil had developed a musical relationship that was almost impossible to recreate. They knew each other's timing, instincts, and reactions on stage. Rush's performances depended on that connection. So when Anika joined the group, the goal was never to pretend nothing had changed. Everything had changed. But change did not mean the music had to disappear. During the first rehearsals, one thing became clear. Anika was not approaching Rush's catalog like a fan trying to imitate a hero. She approached it like a musician, respecting another musician's work. She focused on understanding why the songs worked, why certain drum patterns created tension, why certain fills made a chorus hit harder, why Neil's choices mattered emotionally, not just technically. That mindset impressed Geddy Lee, because for someone like Geddy, the most important thing was not hearing a perfect copy of the past. It was hearing someone who understood the soul behind the songs. When Rush finally performed together again, fans immediately noticed something different. Anika's playing had power, but it also had personality. She brought her own feel to the music while keeping the foundation that Rush fans loved, and that balance was exactly what made the moment special. The performance was not a replacement ceremony, it was a reunion, a reminder that Rush's music could continue without forgetting where it came from. But there was still one question everyone wanted answered. What did Geddy Lee really think when he heard Anika play Rush songs for the first time? Because if anyone could tell whether she truly belonged in that seat, it was the man who had shared the stage with Neil Peart for over 40 years. When Geddy Lee first heard Anika Nilles play Rush's music, the moment was about more than just technique. It was about trust. For a band like Rush, trust was everything. Geddy, Alex Lifeson, and Neil Peart spent decades building a musical connection where every member understood exactly how the others moved. They could feel changes in tempo, energy, and emotion without even thinking about it. That kind of chemistry cannot be forced. So when Anika entered that world, she had to prove something much deeper than "I can play these songs." She had to prove "I understand what these songs mean." And that was where she surprised people. Instead of treating Neil Peart's drum parts like untouchable museum pieces, Anika approached them with the mindset of a performer. She respected the original arrangements, but allowed herself to breathe inside the music. That was important because Neil himself was known for evolving. He constantly explored new ideas, experimented with different sounds, and pushed himself creatively throughout Rush's career. In a way, Anika's approach matched the same spirit that made Neil great. She was not copying a legend, she was continuing the tradition of exploration. For Geddy Lee, that difference likely made the transition easier. He was not looking for someone to recreate the past perfectly, because the past could never truly be recreated. Neil Peart's presence was unique. What Rush needed was someone who could help them create new memories. And when Anika performed with the band, fans saw something unexpected. The songs still had the power. The energy was still there. The connection between the musicians was still alive. The reaction from the audience showed that people were not only accepting the new lineup, many were celebrating the fact that Rush's music was still being performed at the highest level. But behind the applause was another important moment. Geddy Lee was watching a drummer take on one of rock's most demanding roles, and instead of seeing someone trying to fill a space, he saw a musician who had earned her own place. And that realization would become one of the most important parts of Rush's new chapter. The story of Anika Nilles joining Rush was never only about one performance. It was about a band facing one of the biggest questions in rock history. Can a legendary group continue after losing the person who helped define its sound? For Rush, the answer depended on finding the right balance. They had to honor Neil Peart's incredible legacy, while also accepting that moving forward meant creating something new. That is why Anika Nilles was such an interesting choice. She was not selected because she could become another Neil Peart. No one could. Neil's style, personality, and influence were completely his own. She was chosen because she brought something different. Anika's drumming style is known for being powerful, but also unpredictable. She combines technical skill with creativity, making choices that feel modern while still serving the music, and that approach helped change the way fans looked at Rush's return. At first, some people were nervous. They wondered if seeing Rush without Neil would feel wrong. They wondered if the emotion of the band would still be there. But the first performances showed a different reality. The heart of Rush was never only one person. It was the connection between musicians. It was the feeling created when talented people listened to each other and pushed each other forward. Geddy Lee's reaction became important because he represented the history of the band. He was not just another listener, he was one of the people who built the sound fans loved. If Geddy felt comfortable, if Alex felt the chemistry, then fans had a reason to believe. Anika's role was not to erase Neil's impact. Every note she played existed because of the foundation Neil helped create. Instead, she became part of the next chapter. And that is what made her first performance with Rush such a powerful moment. It was not about replacing a legend. It was about proving that a legacy can continue in a new voice. But the biggest emotional moment was still ahead, because the true test was whether Rush could make fans feel the same magic again. In the end, Anika Nilles' first performance with Rush was about much more than a drummer sitting behind a famous drum kit. It was about a legendary band discovering that the future did not have to look exactly like the past. Neil Peart's influence on Rush will always be impossible to replace. His songwriting, his creativity, and his approach to drumming changed the way generations of musicians viewed the instrument. But Rush's music was never built on one person alone. It was built on connection. Geddy Lee's voice and bass lines, Alex Lifeson's guitar work, and Neil's unforgettable rhythms created something special because three musicians were constantly pushing each other. When Anika Nilles joined them, she understood that responsibility. She did not walk onto the stage trying to prove she was the next Neil Peart. She walked onto the stage as herself, and that may have been the biggest reason Geddy Lee and the band accepted her. She respected the history, but she was not trapped by it. She brought energy, confidence, and a fresh perspective to songs that had been played for decades. For fans, that first performance became a reminder that great music can survive change. A band can lose a member, a chapter can end, but the spirit behind the music can continue. The shock for Geddy Lee was not that Anika could play difficult Rush songs. Many talented drummers could do that. The surprise was seeing someone understand the emotion behind those songs and bring them back to life in a way that felt honest. And that is why Anika Nilles' first performance with Rush mattered. It was not a replacement. It was a beginning, a new chapter for one of rock's most respected bands, built on the foundation of the past, but brave enough to move into the future.